Under the bright sun of the Mediterranean, in the year 415 BCE, a fleet of gleaming Athenian triremes cast their shadows across the glittering waters of the Aegean. Painted eyes on their prows seemed to glare toward an unseen destiny. The decks were crowded with warriors, oarsmen, sailors, and hopeful adventurers, their minds filled with dreams of glory and empire. This was the beginning of what would come to be known as the Sicilian Expedition, one of the most ambitious, improbable, and disastrous campaigns in the long history of ancient warfare. Athens, at the height of its cultural brilliance and naval power, sought to conquer a distant island and shape the fate of the Mediterranean. Instead, it nearly destroyed itself. The story of the Sicilian Expedition is a tragedy of human ambition, an epic that unfolds at the intersection of politics, pride, and fate. At its heart lies the tension between vision and hubris, between the dreams of a democratic empire and the cold realities of war. To understand how Athens decided to gamble everything on this perilous adventure, one must first understand the world it inhabited, a world ruled not by nations, but by city-states locked in a contest for power and survival. Athens in the 5th century BCE was not just a city, it was an idea. From the ashes of the Persian invasions, it had emerged as a beacon of democracy, intellect, and art. Its citizens prided themselves on their freedom, their debate, their theater, and their navy. The greatest naval force the ancient world had ever seen. Behind the marble brilliance of the Parthenon lay the confidence of a people who believed they could master destiny. But shadows stretched across this brilliance. The Peloponnesian War, that long and grinding conflict with Sparta and her allies, had drained Athens for years. Neither side could achieve a decisive victory, and as the years dragged on, Athens began to search for opportunities that could shift the tide forever in its favor. The opportunity appeared to come from the distant island of Sicily, a land of fertile fields, rich trade routes, and ancient cities. Chief among these cities was Syracuse, a powerful Greek colony that stood as the dominant force on the island. To the Athenians, Sicily shimmered like a prize awaiting a bold victor. Rumors swirled in Athenian assembly halls of vast resources, potential allies, and the chance to strike at the Spartan supply lines. More cynically, it also offered a tempting distraction from the stalemate at home. When the small city of Egesta, on the western tip of Sicily, sent ambassadors to Athens pleading for help against its rival Selinus and offering gold in return, many Athenians saw a chance for greatness. But not everyone agreed on the wisdom of this expedition. At the heart of the Athenian debate stood three towering figures, each representing a different vision for the city's future. There was Nicias, a cautious and conservative general, who had long warned against reckless ventures. There was Alcibiades, the brilliant, charismatic, and scandalous young politician who dreamed of empire without limits. And there was Lamachus, the seasoned warrior willing to take whatever risks victory required. Their debate would shape the destiny of Athens. In the summer assembly, the people gathered under the open sky to decide the fate of their city. Thousands crowded the Pnyx hill, voices rising in excitement and argument. Alcibiades spoke first, his words a spark. He painted a vision of conquest and prestige, reminding Athenians of their imperial glory and their unbroken naval power. Why stop now, he asked, when the whole Western world lay before them? He promised allies in Sicily, easy victories, and untold wealth. To the restless citizens weary of stalemate, his words sounded like the call of destiny. Nicias rose next, imploring caution. He argued that Athens was already overextended, that the expedition was a gamble driven by vanity rather than necessity. He described Sicily as vast and distant, its cities numerous and strong. To attack Syracuse was to invite disaster. Yet the more Nicias argued against it, the more the people's imagination was inflamed. When he tried to dissuade them by exaggerating the resources that would be needed, hoping to frighten them with the sheer scale of preparation, the opposite happened. The people voted to provide everything he asked for, and more. Thus, by the will of the Athenian democracy, the greatest expedition in the city's history was launched. Over 130 triremes and some 27,000 men were prepared. Soldiers, sailors, craftsmen, and slaves. The harbor of Piraeus brimmed with activity as shipwrights hammered, supply officers shouted, and banners of Athena fluttered in the sea breeze. It was a sight unmatched even in Athens' proud maritime tradition. The city was alive with anticipation. Even skeptics could not help but marvel at the magnitude of the spectacle. But as Athens prepared to send its fleet, ominous signs appeared. On a summer morning, the citizens awoke to find that nearly all the sacred Hermes, stone statues of Hermes placed throughout the city, had been defaced in the night. The popular mind was gripped by superstition and outrage. To desecrate the Hermes was sacrilege, an insult to the gods that seemed to bode ill for the journey ahead. Suspicion quickly turned toward Alcibiades, whose reputation for unrestrained revelry and blasphemy made him an easy target. His political enemies seized the moment, accusing him of sacrilegious mockery of the sacred Eleusinian mysteries in private gatherings. Alcibiades demanded an immediate trial before departure, eager to clear his name, but his opponents maneuvered to postpone it. The fleet sailed with him still under the shadow of accusation, a portent that destiny had already begun to twist against Athens. When the fleet departed, the entire city gathered to watch from the shorelines in the hills overlooking Piraeus. Families wept, children waved, and the sea echoed with cheers and the rhythm of oars. In that moment, the Athenians believed they were witnessing the unfolding of greatness. The ships gleamed in the sunlight, their black hulls slicing through blue waters as they turned westward, away from Greece, toward a distant and unknown horizon. The journey across the Ionian Sea was long, but spirits were high. The fleet made landfall in southern Italy, securing allies and restocking supplies. Yet even as they advanced, the uncertainties began to multiply. Reports from Sicily contradicted one another. Some promised support from local cities, others warned that Syracuse was preparing for war. The three Athenian commanders disagreed fiercely on how to proceed. Lamachus urged a swift, bold attack on Syracuse before the enemy could prepare. Nicias counseled caution and diplomacy. Alcibiades argued for building alliances first. Ultimately, a compromise was reached. They would explore the island, gauge support, and then strike. But before long, news came that changed everything. Back in Athens, Alcibiades had been recalled to stand trial for his alleged crimes. He was ordered to return to face the assembly. Reluctantly, he left the fleet, boarding a small ship to head home. But somewhere along the way, he disappeared, defecting to the Spartans rather than face a politically motivated trial. To Athens, it was betrayal. To Alcibiades, it was survival. His defection would soon become one of the most consequential in history. Leaderless and divided, the Athenian force now faltered. Myaces, old and ailing, found himself in command of an expedition he had opposed from the beginning. Still, he pressed on, occupying positions around Syracuse and attempting to blockade the city. At first, luck seemed to favor the Athenians. They managed to seize the high ground overlooking the city, constructing fortifications that threatened to strangle Syracuse into submission. But the tide soon turned. In response to Athens' advance, Sparta, now advised by the very man they once fought against, Alcibiades, sent one of their best generals, Gylippus, to aid the Syracusans. Under his leadership, the defenders gained confidence. He reorganized their forces, built counterwalls to block the Athenian siege lines, and coordinated daring sorties. The war became one of walls surrounding walls, each line of stone and earth a measure of willpower between two civilizations. In the marshy plains outside Syracuse, thousands of men fought under clouds of dust and arrows, while both sides toiled under the burning Sicilian sun. As weeks turned into months, morale began to crumble in the Athenian camp. Supplies dwindled, disease spread, and the once mighty fleet lay idle in the harbor. Sicilian allies that Athens had counted upon hesitated or withdrew, uncertain which side would win. Gylippus dressed his troops in confidence, while Nicias, plagued by illness, sent desperate messages to Athens begging for reinforcements or retreat. But the assembly refused to accept defeat. Instead, they sent another massive army, under the command of Demosthenes, to join Nicias. When Demosthenes arrived, he was shocked at the condition of the camp. He proposed an immediate attack to reverse the situation, hoping for a surprise victory. In a daring night assault, the Athenians climbed the slopes of Epipolae under the stars, their torches glimmering in silence as they moved toward the Syracusan fortifications. But darkness became their undoing. Confusion spread as soldiers lost their bearings, friend fought friend, and alarm horns blared through the night. The attack collapsed into chaos. By dawn, the Athenians had been driven back with heavy losses. Demosthenes urged withdrawal, but Nicias hesitated still, fearing divine displeasure and political consequences at home. He delayed, and that hesitation sealed their fate. The Syracusans seized the moment. With Gylippus's help, they launched a full-scale counterattack, pressing the Athenians both by land and sea. The once proud Athenian fleet, trapped within the great harbor, tried to force a breakout. The scene that followed was one of the most desperate naval battles of the ancient world. Dozens of triremes clashed in the narrow waters, oars shattering, bronze rams splintering hulls, men crying out in horror and rage. The harbor trembled with the thunder of war. But the Syracusans had superior positioning, fresh crews, and the will to defend their home. When the smoke cleared, the harbor was littered with wrecks. The proud Athenian ships had been destroyed. What remained of the army fled inland, abandoning the sea that had always been Athens' source of strength. Thousands of soldiers marched through hostile terrain, starving and sick, harried by Syracusan pursuers. Trapped near the sonorous river, thirst drove them to madness. They rushed into the water, drinking even as arrows rained down upon them. The river ran red with blood and mud. Nicias and Demosthenes were captured alive, their men slaughtered or taken as slaves. The cities of Sicily watched as what remained of the once mighty fleet was burned or seized. When the grim survivors' tales finally reached Athens, the city fell into stunned silence. The loss was total, an entire generation destroyed, the treasury emptied, the empire shaken. Thucydides, the historian who chronicled this tragedy, wrote that the defeat was the most remarkable event in the whole war. He meant it not merely for its scale, but for the bitter irony it represented, that a city devoted to reason, democracy, and brilliance could fall victim to its own intoxicating ambition. Yet the story of the Sicilian Expedition endures not only as a chronicle of failure, but as a mirror held up to the ambitions of states and people in every age. It asks questions that echo beyond antiquity. How far should a democracy go in pursuit of glory? How does collective optimism become collective ruin? And can the courage of individuals, men like Nicias, who fought reluctantly but honorably, or Alcibiades, whose brilliance burned too bright, ever overcome the madness of crowds? In the years that followed, Athens fought on, but it never recovered its former strength. Its enemies sensed weakness, and one by one the pillars of its empire crumbled. Sparta, with Persian gold and disciplined patience, finally brought the city to its knees. The Parthenon still stood, but its people were changed. They had glimpsed the limits of their own greatness. The ruins of Syracuse still bear faint traces of that long-ago siege, fragments of walls, broken stones in the earth, remnants of ancient courage and folly alike. When modern visitors walk there, the sea breeze carries whispers of the past. You can almost see, in the shimmering heat, the ghostly outlines of triremes gliding across the harbor and hear the distant clash of bronze and shield. Time has softened the outlines of the tragedy, but not its lesson. For as long as humans dream too greatly, the story of the Sicilian expedition will be told, a tale of ambition's reach, of destiny pursued beyond reason, of the sea that swallowed an empire's pride. And thus, across 25 centuries, its echo remains, borne on the wind of history, haunting, eternal, and profoundly human.